everyone. Welcome to the New Jersey Morning Show. I'm Cara DeFalco.
And I'm Mike Favetta. We're so glad you could join us today. Online lending marketplace LendingTree recently conducted a study around coastal flooding in the U.S. and perhaps not surprisingly for folks living down the shore, New Jersey has the highest risk for coastal flooding.
Here now to tell us more about the study is Rob Bhatt, an insurance analyst who works on LendingTree's latest study. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest.
Hi, so, Rob, tell us what prompted LendingTree to produce this study in the first place?
We wanted to quantify the flood risks in states along the oceans and major lakes. Just following the news, we know that flooding events are up and the damage is more severe. So we wanted to take a closer look and see how severe these risks are in these different states that are exposed to potential coastal flooding.
And given the geographic footprint of New Jersey, relatively small compared to other East Coast states, was it surprising that New Jersey had the highest risk?
It was surprising for a couple of reasons, yes, because I think when we think of flood damage, we think of states exposed to hurricanes and tropical storms along the Gulf. But we looked at these other factors, including the amount of building value and also population in areas that are exposed to coastal flooding. When you combine these risks, New Jersey rose to the top. New Jersey doesn't necessarily have the most amount of area exposed to coastal flooding, but it does have the highest value of buildings and the greatest potential risk of injuries and loss of life in areas that are exposed to flooding, to coastal flooding specifically.
That's so interesting. And you know, Rob, you did touch on some of the factors that specifically put New Jersey at risk. So it's really, that our dense population and just, the very desirable Jersey Shore. Were there any other factors that really helped boost Jersey to the top of this list?
The three factors we focused on for this study were the amount of land exposed to flooding. And although New Jersey is not the largest state, when you look at states that have just the amount of area that is exposed to coastal flooding, New Jersey ranks fourth among coastal states. So,
Wow.
That is sizable. But then when you look at the value of buildings in areas, that is where the greatest risk lies. New Jersey ranks number one in that area, and it's not even close in terms of the value of buildings exposed to flooding. And then also, the grim stat is they put FEMA puts a monetary value on injuries and loss of life to people, and there is large population density in these areas.
We were so hard hit by Sandy back in 2012 that the building codes have changed, and there is now the requirement to put the homes on pedestals and make the first floor, unoccupied. So have any of those indications changed the outlook? Whereas the areas that were hit hardest by Sandy, a lot of them have rebuilt to these new standards. Does that mitigate any of the risk from flooding?
It certainly does. That's one thing you could do to reduce the damage to your buildings, of course. So, the value of those changes takes time to set in and be calculated. But those are steps you can do and people need to do in areas where they are exposed to flooding. You see people do this in areas along the Gulf Coast for the same reason. In some areas, they move their essential home systems, their HVACs, their furnaces to a higher floor, so it's not on the ground floor, so it won't be damaged if floodwaters rise. And certainly elevating your home is another way to reduce that flood risk.
So, Rob, along with elevating your home, what other steps or protections can people take to protect themselves and their homes from coastal flooding?
That's a great question. The flood risks today are significantly greater than they would have been for today's home buyers are reaching an age where, when they were young and their parents were buying houses, flooding happened about half as much as it happens today. We know
Wow.
in 2/3 of the EPA's coastal weather station, recorded flooding events have doubled compared to what we were seeing in the 90s. So it's a risk that more people have to take seriously. For starters, you want to have a plan to keep yourself and your family safe. That includes an evacuation plan. there are these steps you could do to minimize the damage that floodwaters, coastal flooding can do to your home. That includes the steps you mentioned, like elevating the home, or other things like keeping valuables and expensive home systems, HVACs, furnaces, things of that nature on a higher floor. And then the other thing is consider flood insurance. Traditionally, you've only had to get flood insurance if your home is in a high risk flood zone. But what we're seeing now is about a third of the damage from flooding comes outside of what have traditionally been identified as high risk flood zones by FEMA. So flood insurance is something that more people should account for when they look at the cost of home ownership, and keep that in mind when they budget. And then the, if you will, the other thing is there's something that coastal communities need to be mindful of, and that includes land use decisions and being careful to not build buildings and put homes in areas that may be susceptible to flooding. And then the other thing is investing in flood control systems, drainage channels and other things, so that if as flooding becomes more severe, there's a way to minimize the risk to people and to property.
All good tips. Rob Bhatt, thank you so much for your time this morning from LendingTree. We appreciate it. Thank you guys for doing this study. I think, like I said, I don't know that anybody who lives at the Jersey Shore is surprised by this information, but it's a very interesting stat to have. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And, please visit our website. We have plenty of resources there that I think your readers would find helpful.
Great. Thank you. And what's the website?
LendingTree.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob. We appreciate it. Have a great
Thanks,
weekend.
Rob.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Mike, obviously as you're also our meteorologist, and you are very interested in climate and things like that. And I'm really interested in your take on all of this.
So I'm glad that the insurance industry is kind of recognizing that you only have to go back to the 1990s to see that so much more flooding has been occurring, because we talk about it ad nauseum and the climate record, but the fact that there are these little nuggets of information that kind of stick with people that don't do this on a day-to-day basis, talk about flooding, talk about climate change, that's important. But he really hit the nail on the head regarding these programs, for instance, where New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, is buying back homes in flood risk areas, giving the homeowners fair market value to move away from areas that just flood every few years when there's a big rain event or coastal storm.
Yeah, I mean, really ever since Sandy, and I don't know that anybody who lived here will ever forget some of those, that half of a yellow house that was just left standing, the Seaside Heights boardwalk in the ocean, things like that. And it was one of those things where I really thought to myself, if your home quite literally washed away, don't go back. That is not property you want to be building on. Just let the state have it, collect your insurance money, collect, like you said, now at least they're giving them the fair market value. Take your money and run. Literally.
And it's hard to get people to that point, specifically when, like Rob mentioned, the land use, where you have areas that have flooded recently, but we'll put an apartment complex here. What could go wrong?
Right.
And I see these as I drive by them, and I'm like, really? Don't they know what happened there just 10 years ago? So there's a whole lot of interesting things in that realm regarding of how to be smart about where to put your home.
Well, like anything else, there's a lot at play. Politics and money always have a lot to say in these situations.
Well, you're watching the New Jersey Morning Show only on New Jersey. Find us on demand at ONNJ.com.